our first questioner was Liz. And
Hmm.
so, Liz, would you mind um, unmuting and turning on your camera and asking your questions to Kevin?
Yeah, hi, Pete.
Hello.
Yes, thanks very much for all the detail on doing SuDS on hilly sites or the sloping sites. But for an even more integrated approach, what's scope for combining with small-scale hydro so you get some renewable energy generation alongside your water management scheme?
Yeah, I mean, a bit like rainwater harvesting, it's very unpredictable. It's like, the vast majority of the time, I know it doesn't feel like it, but it is. The vast majority of the time, it's not raining. And so, if you're wanting to run sort of micro hydro, you're then, I think that water would run out very quickly. Yeah, you're storing water, and you're trying to make hay while the kind of rain rains. And I think it's definitely something to explore, but I think, compared to then having something like a stream, a small stream, or, the kind of water body, it's very different kettle of fish trying to store water. You'll get some power for it. I haven't seen enough information about it, but my suspicion is, oh, sorry, got a bit of someone else coming through. Yeah, my suspicion is it kind of wouldn't stack up, yeah, maybe there's more potential. We're really, really keen on black water treatment, decentralizing black water treatment, and actually seeing that, yeah, foul sewage treatment on developments. Similar approach to SuDS in a way, deal with it at source rather than pipe it all to a sort of centralized treatment works and then have the CSO problems and stuff like that. Actually, we think new development should be treating black water on site. Then you have a very predictable supply of water, constant supply of water. That I feel maybe is has more potential for microhydro, particularly
Yeah.
on bigger sites where you might, got enough predictable flow every day. I think that's a huge opportunity, but maybe also an opportunity for microhydro. But
Yeah,
um,
okay then. I think there mu must be some good European practice out there. Although, of course,
yeah,
not from the Netherlands because it's not hilly enough. But I think there is a network of European hilly cities, although they're mostly interested in bikes, I
right,
think. But I can remember in the past trying to get them into a project using the European Fund Interreg,
yeah.
which was looking at small-scale hydro on hills.
Mm,
But I don't know what's happened lately. But
mm.
anyway,
Yeah,
there might be
no,
some.
very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see if that, evidence to show that,
Yeah.
it could be used, to store it and then release it via a little microhydro. But yeah,
Mm.
once it's gone, you're waiting for the next rainfall event, aren't you, really? But
Yeah. Well, thanks.
yeah,
I'll keep an eye
yeah,
on it.
no, thanks, Liz. Yeah,
Thank
really
you.
interesting.
As a supplement to that, my village, Llanberis here in North Wales, has got a micro hydro scheme which draws water from the mountain Moelelio behind the village. The catchment is about the same size as the village, and we've noticed in the dry summers, although this is a rural catchment, heather-covered slopes, we're getting very, very significantly less hydropower during the summers than we are during the rainfall events, and even in dry springs. So I think I'd echo what Kevin says there. The evidence would be you'd need that consistent flow from black water that was then treated, and that might deliver you some hydropower.
Mm.
Uh, but we've got more questions, so I wonder, have we got Brendan back to ask his question? Yes, we have. Brendan, would you mind unmuting and turning on your video and asking your question?
Yeah, I think it'd be working. Hi, Kevin. Yeah, great talk. Lovely to hear about it. Kind of from a water resources point, and you touched on it just then, for rainwater harvesting mixed in with SuDS. Granted that obviously, I mean, it doesn't rain all the time, like the sun doesn't shine all of the time. But given the opportunities of rainwater harvesting, especially for flood events, I deal with drought as well. So we've seen large times of there's dry periods and when it'll suddenly break one of the flood of the rain, but building it into systems, not so sometimes large estates like you've spoken about, or even high-rise buildings. Is there an opportunity? Granted, it wouldn't work all the time, but kind of that, you know, hedging your bets kind of opportunities of rainwater harvesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, it's always been top of the hierarchy, top of the discharge hierarchy, and top of the management train hierarchy, and so it's, since sort of day zero, and it's embedded in the standards and things like this. But yeah, for forever, you see so many sort of design statements and drainage statements for planning authority, for planning processes, sort of saying, oh yeah, we considered rainwater harvesting, we decided it wasn't appropriate, so we moved on to the next thing down the hierarchy. It's almost just like glossed over and ignored. And I think it's easy for areas with abundant kind of water to dare I say, Wales has a kind of, its fair share of rain, and so there's this sort of sense in the wetter parts of the country that, oh, it's just not needed, it doesn't have a value. Which is, I can understand from one point of view, but if you're not experiencing hosepipe bans and things like that, it's a significant driver that's missing from trying to get rainwater harvesting in. But of course, rain also has a huge carbon footprint. I mean, we're treating it. We have the chemical footprint of trying to treat this stuff. We're pumping it around the kind of country, trying to get it to people's houses. There's a huge carbon footprint in pumping all this treated water around for most of it to be used in ways that didn't need treating in the first place. And I think that's maybe part of the conversation which needs to be expressed a bit more, that it's not just around water scarcity. That's part of it, and that's going to be increasingly an issue. But for parts of the country, the water scarcity is probably not going to ever be a huge issue, potentially. But the carbon footprint of the water industry and potable water is huge. And if we can be using less water for purposes that we don't need that level of treatment, then rain that lands on your development is a huge opportunity for that. There's a great scheme by Bjarke Ingels Group in Denmark. If you look up, do an internet search for Bjarke Ingels Group rainwater harvesting. It's a lovely circular pond with some apartments in a sort of semicircle facing onto this pond. And that is something I'm very excited about, the idea of community scale rainwater harvesting as part of a SuDS system. So you're creating a feature, which is an amenity feature, a biodiversity feature, a SuDS feature that can store big volumes of water in extreme rainfall events. Making sure it's been cleaned before the water gets there, and then being able to recycle that back into the buildings as a community scale rainwater harvesting system. Which then, with that centralized sort of, well, not central, but with community sort of scale, then you've got efficiencies around the pumping and things like this. You've got energy efficiency around that, rather than they could have done a similar approach but fit every apartment with a rainwater harvesting. It would have cost a lot more, probably used a lot more energy, and it wouldn't have had the multiple benefits of creating this water feature in front of these apartments in this sort of communal space. So that's a really nice example, I think, of how you can integrate rainwater management as rainwater harvesting in these things. So I think it's something that the industry needs to promote a lot more. It's not something just to kind of really not actually consider, just gloss over, bypass, and move on to the next the next thing in the hierarchy.
Yeah, I think just briefly, I think the conversation, especially in England, needs to start changing, because there's going to be a massive campaign now this summer from a water efficiency perspective, because there's a projected shortfall of 5 billion litres of water in England by 2050. So again, even though it doesn't rain everywhere, it's starting to get people to recognise the use of water for toilets, simply for cleaning your cars, for doing your washing, and the opportunities of new builds, because you're hard plumbing everything in. You can designate this reuse of the water, and as you say, it reduces the emissions and the footprints as well. So hopefully the conversation will start expanding a bit further.
I think it's definitely happening. Like a lot of these things, the cat's out of the bag a little bit. I think what the water industry is really not considering, though, is the black water treatment. I'm sorry to bring it up again, but the problem with rainwater harvesting, particularly in certain parts of the country, that you're having to collect huge volumes of water, but much as you can to last you a long period of time. And that that is a challenge, and I think the community scale sort of pond type thing is one solution to that. But I do think the black water treatment is another solution. You don't have to store it really, or very modest storage, because it's so predictable. and it happens. We've been exploring it with RHS Wisley, sort of west of London, big RHS Gardens and Visitor Centre. And of course, they're keeping these gardens alive in the summer by extracting from boreholes and from the river. Those licenses are under threat, over time. They know there's potential that those might be taken away in the future. But if you look at their graph of demand through the year, massive peak in the summer, that's exactly when they have the massive peak in visitor numbers that are visiting their tea shop and then moving on to their toilets. They like they two
Yeah, no,
effectively mirror each other. And
Yeah.
yes, you could be looking at rainwater harvesting to try and deliver. That's a huge volume of water that you need through the summer. It will have a benefit, but you'll still be turning to your boreholes and your river to meet the irrigation demands of something like that. But if you put all these visitors that are drinking your tea, that the water that comes out the tap is like, keep it on site. And there are systems, so we're exploring with them these kind of greenhouse type systems, almost like winter gardens. So we're selling it to them as like, well, people actually walk through these things and there's planting in them. So there's a system called Organica, which I think are originally from Hungary. They've done stuff kind of all over the world, but in the heart of housing areas, in the heart of business districts, black water treatment in systems that you can live and work right up to, and people actually do walk through the treatment plant itself in these
Right.
kind of greenhouses. It's worth having a look at those, because I feel like those are a huge opportunity, and I think the water industry is not really properly considering decentralizing its sewage treatment approaches.
Yeah. I mean, with my old hat on, the risk I see from like rebed systems and those kind of things is the management issues of them, and it's the same issues with beds, is that the training and the management and the contracts have been in place that tend to fall apart after 10, 15 years, and nobody is then managing, clearing out, ensuring that the flow remains.
But you've got to compare that to what we've got now, a centralized system where we have millions of hours of CSO, CSO happening every year. It's like, it's not as, and a lot of people kind of like look at, like, we'll talk about SuDS and go, oh yeah, but what if that blocks? What if this blocks? There's like the risk of failure, or this could go wrong with SuDS. It's like, yeah, but if you compare it to our conventional drainage network, which goes wrong all the time, which has, we've like, so much of our existing drainage network has blocked gullies, blocked pipes, trolleys in culverts. It's a flawed system. So you kind of like, nothing is perfect.
No. Absolutely.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, thanks, Brendan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brendan. And just as a coda for that one, this image behind me is Greener Grangetown. Hasn't been properly maintained for 10 years, or until Ian Titherington, who's one of the local residents, got a gang of people together to work on it. And you could see it failing, but you could see it failing very, very slowly as the pores in the soil started to block up with leaf litter that hadn't been removed. And it failed slowly, it failed obviously, it hasn't stopped working. With pipe drainage, the first thing that you often notice is the fact that your toilet explodes. So I'd say yay for SuDS. And we've got another question from Deb Hill. Deb, would you like to turn on your camera and microphone and ask Kevin your question?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I won't turn my camera on if that's all right. Kevin, that was a great talk, and I know you've done work with my colleagues here in Swansea on SuDS schemes. And I think one of the issues that we keep coming up against is the maintenance ongoing, and this just follows on from what's been talked about just now. That is an obstacle, and I was wondering, with the schemes where you're capturing rainfall at source, which is through private housing, the rills on the road, it's a kind of multifunctional collection of water. Does that cause? I'd just like to know if anybody, if any work's been done on the sort of cost benefit analysis, not to say that we want to go back to the old system, but you can see that, having mown grass and fenced off areas probably cheaper than maintaining habitats and multiple, ownership of areas of land that you're counting on to meet your targets. Sorry, I'm not explaining that very well, but I just want
no, it's fine, thank you. Yeah, there's a few things in there. I mean, I think the first thing is what would we expect there to be on development? So bearing in mind that we haven't added on any of our schemes, I mean, the stuff we're doing with Swansea's retrofit, which is obviously sort of different kettle of fish, and I'd love to do a presentation. Love to do a presentation on the wonderful work in Swansea that, you know, led by Swansea Council and NRW, because I think that's an amazing model for other urban areas to know about. But if we stick with kind of new build development, we've never created a new space for SuDS. So we've only ever used, basically there's very little difference between our landscape and our development than if it didn't have SuDS on it. You know, we have hard surfaces to maintain. We have green spaces that would need maintenance. So this has always happened. There's always been this question: who maintains green spaces? Who maintains shrubs? Who maintains grass? Who maintains habitat? If we've been creating ecological features, sometimes ponds and wetlands. Nothing to do with SuDS, but all these things we would expect to be in development anyway, and someone be maintaining it. And really, the best SuDS systems, they tweak those same ingredients. And they do, you know, SuDS will always add new maintenance aspects, but that will basically be about inlets, outlets, flow controls. So there are subtleties and nuances around SuDS which are different to conventional landscapes, which then someone needs to understand and be able to maintain. But on all of our schemes, actually, there is no specialist maintenance, if you like. You know, on those housing schemes we saw, it's the residents themselves that look after the SuDS system, because actually those added elements that make it SuDS functional are very simple, easy to access, and easy to understand features. So there shouldn't be a significant maintenance burden. And interestingly, to sort of pick up on your point about different habitat types. I mean, yes, I could also show you, just didn't have time today, a very kind of bog standard housing association scheme we did years ago now, where it's just your classic amenity grass, monoamenity grass. There is some habitat, but you know, it's quite, you know, it is a low budget scheme, and actually saved the developer about, I think it was about 11% the developer calculated compared to conventional drainage. And it's very easy, conventional, low maintenance. We didn't change anything about the layout design. We'd inherited a layout and made the SuDS work. So we didn't add any green space. We didn't add any maintenance to what was going to be delivered there anyway. And also there's a misconception around more biodiverse sort of landscapes as well, that they take more maintenance. But quite often the difference between, you know, amenity grass looks kind of like cheap to maintain, but it's regular mowing through the summer. Whereas when we're talking sort of meadow vegetation, it might be, you know, 2 cuts a year. And it might cost you more to do those 2 cuts, but you're only doing it twice a year compared to, you know, coming and mowing every couple of weeks in the summer for amenity grass. So a lot of the time, these alternative vegetation coverages, typologies, can be cost neutral, sometimes cost beneficial. Obviously, if we're putting ornamental planting in there, then that needs to be considered whether there's appropriate maintenance to maintain that. But I think the challenge comes then when you start thinking, well, who's responsible for which bits of a landscape? And this is, I think, in a way, the biggest challenge with integrated design approaches. It's not always obvious which bits kind of SuDS and which bits just general public landscape, because actually good design, it shouldn't be that obvious. And then I think the challenge becomes, well, I'm maintaining the SuDS bits and you're maintaining the non-SuDS bits. Where is that line? And also, well, the SuDS bits got play features in. Who maintains that now? Are we 2 people maintaining different aspects of something, of a SuDS feature? So I think, you know, it is something we need to get our heads around, you know, and is someone maintaining the hard surfaces, you know. But you know, I think we need to think of it more as, actually, this is just integrated into site maintenance. There would be a site maintenance cost, and it changes very little with integrated design approaches. The extra cost of maintaining a SuDS functional site compared to that same site being non-SuDS functional is tiny additional costs if it's designed well. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
No, very, very much so. It's kind of, you know, that's why I was thinking, you know, you need that integrated multidisciplinary approach, don't you? And then you can tap into other budgets, say for biodiversity or recreation or community engagement, whatever it might be. But it's joining all of that up, and
absolutely,
it's you know, it's a lot of extra effort to do that, but obviously, you know, very much worthwhile. But I think, you know, it's the retrofit ones with the new build, and you can get developers to
Yeah.
obviously,
And I think it'd be great to have another conversation about the retrofit thing, because I think that's when the maintenance question really comes across strongly. And I think it's such an issue. You mentioned Green and Grangetown. The lack of willingness to kind of keep investing, keep nurturing these things. Like it's almost like, again, it's a drainage mentality of fit and forget. You can't do that with green infrastructure approaches. We have to, and I keep saying to clients, whatever your budget is, build half as many rain gardens, ring fence the rest to look after the ones you're building. But the temptation is to build as many with your budget and then not know what to do with them, and then they start failing. As Pete said, yes, they don't fail catastrophically, but we have seen, badly designed ones, which effectively are pretty much failing hydraulically from day one. So even if your main ambition is the hydraulic functionality of these things, it's much better to build less of them, but make sure you look after them, that they stay functioning, than it is to put as much volume in ground as rain gardens, and then be failing within a few years, and you're not getting any of your hydraulic benefits. But really.
no, thank you, Kevin. That's great.
Thank you, Deborah.